We will call to order our regular meeting this evening for the town board for June 25th, 2018 at 7:12 p.m. Ms. Mellenbacher, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker.
Here.
Barry Wilson. Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Sislowski.
Here.
Dr. Jones, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3 this evening is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board. Are there any new items for consideration? Seeing none, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer, a second from Mr. Baker, approving the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the agenda is approved unanimously. Moving on to item 4 is an award presentation. Mr. Hale.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Town Board. It is my great pleasure to present the following award, and I'm going to ask Ms. Kelly Hodling to come up and join me up here, please. Make her feel nice and exposed and uncomfortable. So as many of you already know, our very own Kelly Hodling received the 2018 Colorado City and County Managers Association Assistant of the Year. She was nominated by Patty Garcia in her capacity as acting town manager, who cited Kelly's great work, both on establishing our quiet zones last year with the railroad, all of her work with the public works facility construction. She also cited her leadership with the Colorado Women Leading Government Committee and her recent graduation from Leadership Northern Colorado. In my short time here, I can attest that I have found Ms. Hodling to be a smart and talented, hardworking and dedicated, engaged and insightful employee, and that this award is well deserved. We're lucky to have employees of her caliber in Windsor. So Kelly, on behalf of CCCMA, I proudly present you with this award that I took out of your office earlier. So you may recognize it. So there we go.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Moving on to item 5, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board, Historic Preservation Commission.
No update. There's not been a meeting since.
Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
On our consent agenda tonight are approval of 2 new members, or 1 returning member and 1 new member to the Water Board, so we'll now have a quorum, I believe. And the next meeting for the Water Board is in August.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
We had a meeting a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago. There was really no new information other than just standard information. The big topic was the Toweltown barbecue, that it was a huge success. The board discussed possibly involvement in next year's first concert of the year. So there's talk that the chamber may or may not want to provide food to all next year. So I'll keep the board apprised and the town apprised of that, but the chamber is throwing around. It was lightly attended because we're in the summer. There wasn't a lot of participation on the board, but amongst the board members that were there, that's the big thing that I would say was the takeaway from the meeting, is that the chamber's not sure that they want to provide, maybe make it just an ice cream social type thing, like a ice cream sandwich to everybody, but maybe not have the food aspect.
Okay.
So.
Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the Windsor Housing Authority met last week. Highlighted items would be they expect to close on the land for the new senior housing out in Windshire next month. They're also looking for a name of that particular property, so if anybody comes up with something original, you might forward that to the Housing Authority. And also, they made a request that we discuss in our budget workshops this year or next, I think they probably prefer this year, that we consider providing a full-time Housing Authority manager, put that in our budget. The reason I say that is before too long, they'll have about 300 units to manage with what they have now, and which includes the workforce housing, and what they'll be building in the next phase of the senior housing. That's another 127 units. And right now they have one part-time manager trying to handle all these these duties related to managing these apartments. So I said I would bring this up before the board and that we will have some discussion of it during our budget talks. Great Western Trail Authority, we've received 7 applications for a part-time trail manager, and we will be interviewing some of those prospects in the near future. And that's all I have.
Okay. Town Board Member Kozlowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Madam Mayor, those present, the Clearview Library Board will be meeting this Thursday at 5:30. I will be attending that, so I'll have a report at our next meeting as to what's discussed there. I did miss the Planning Commission because I was at the CML conference this past week, Wednesday, so I don't believe there was liaison present.
Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority and North Front Range MPO. There's not been another meeting from North Front Range MPO since I last gave my report, and we are not going to have a meeting in July. However, I would like to let folks know that if you're interested in learning about the I-25 Express Lane expansion project and the construction on that project and what's taking place and when and where and all of that, there is a meeting that is open to the public this Wednesday, June 27th, from 5:30 to 7:30. You can come at any point in time. There's not an exact presentation. It's one-on-one, but you can come anytime during that point in time at the ranch, and CDOT will be there to talk to you about the Express Lane I-25 expansion project. So there will be that opportunity there. The Downtown Development Authority did meet last week, a week ago Wednesday, and at that meeting we discussed the following key items. So the 512 Ash Street property will be purchased on or by August 31st, 2018. So we're getting very close to the potential of officially closing on that project. The back lots with Brinkman project, that project continues. We have Brinkman working on some key concepts and ideas right now that we will be having a meeting about in the near future, seeing what those are, and then shortly thereafter we will be hosting a key stakeholder meeting, so all of the business folks and anybody else who wants to see what that design is starting to look like and give your input, there will be an upcoming opportunity to do so with that. The DDA board as well as the town board now both sides have signed an agreement to move the mill project forward. So we should be seeing something happening with the mill project in hopefully the next 30 to 90 days, with the anticipation of an actual project opening sometime in July 2019. We did create a new facade improvement program, so we had a large facade improvement program. This is for businesses who needed up to $20,000 per side for some kind of facade improvement to the building. We had some requests from downtown businesses who asked us to look at a smaller plan and opportunity. So for those folks who may only want to spend $5,000 or a couple $100. So we are putting together a small business facade improvement program as well that can be utilized by the businesses in downtown as well. We have we had 2 applicants for the wayfinding project. We interviewed and have made an offer to one of those companies, and so we will be working hopefully with a company in the near future on a wayfinding project opportunity. And again, they're looking at parking and crosswalk. And so they are also looking at quotes and costs on what they can do to begin to look at solutions for parking and also the crosswalk concerns that folks have in the downtown area as well. So that concludes my reports that I have concerning the Downtown Development Authority. Item number 6, public invited to be heard. We didn't have anybody who signed up to speak this evening, but is there anybody who neglected to sign that but did wish to speak to the board on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we will move on to item B of the agenda, which is the consent calendar. In the consent calendar this evening, there are 3 items. We have the minutes of the June 11, 2018 regular meeting and June 18, 2018 special meeting. We have advisory board appointments and resolution 2018-65, a resolution appointing a director to the boards of directors for the Ptarmigan West Metropolitan Districts. Is there a motion concerning the consent calendar?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
A motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Dr. Jones approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no.
Mr. Rennemeyer.
And the consent calendar has been approved unanimously. Moving on then to item C, our official board action. Our first item this evening is a site plan presentation for the Water Valley South 25th filing, Good Samaritan Society Assisted Living Facility and Memory Care Assisted Living. Greg Amble, the Evangelical Lutheran Good Samaritan Society owner. Heather Scott, Boulder Associates Architects, the authorized representative. John Sweet, TST, the authorized representative, with Ms. Berry giving presentation.
Yes, thank you. This is a site plan presentation. You might remember this. This was shown to you at your March 26th meeting, but since that time there have been a couple changes that we wanted to bring the plan back to you to make sure that it was still in good accord. So it is a qualified commercial site plan. It's reviewed in accordance with Article 9 of Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The site is located at the corner of 7th Street and New Liberty Road, right north of the existing Good Samaritan independent living unit or building. The site is zoned RMU and is adjacent to other RMU zone properties and some other residential to the west. So development characteristics are as they were in March. It's about a 3-acre site. The building is the same. It's the partial memory care area and partial assisted living. Same parking that was provided a parking determination by the Planning Commission at that time. And the landscaping is the same area. The changes have been there was planned originally a retaining wall on the New Liberty side of the building, on this side along here. And then also they are now proposing ground-mounted condenser units. Originally, those were going to be housed inside, but due to cost limitations, those are now been pulled out. And then, in reaction to the ground-mounted condensers being outside, landscaping has been changed to help screen these units. So again, the building has not changed. This is the building. You might recognize it. Comes in the 2-story units at the north end of the building and the 1-story units toward the south end. Here's the retaining wall from the plans shown in March. It's a retaining wall that goes along New Liberty, and this is also looking on the other side. So the new plans are to, instead of having the retaining wall, they would just have an exposed foundation area. So looking at the site, you would still see the wall area, but it'd be part of the building instead of the bumped out retaining wall. So the impacts visually are pretty much the same. It will be sloped now instead of having the hard pitch of the wall, and it will be landscaped on the bottom here. And you can kind of see the new gen. And this is the building. These 2 angles have not changed. This is the interior of the site, and then also looking from 7th and New Liberty to the southeast. building elevations, largely the same. Again, what has been changed are the condenser units are now outside. They're about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, so they're not huge units. They have been grouped so that they wouldn't line the whole building, but grouped in different areas. And then in this view, you can kind of see how the slope is here instead of a retaining wall. And again, on the others, this is turning the corner onto New Liberty from 7th. And here is the exposed foundation instead of the retaining wall. And then just other views of the south portion of the site. So this is the landscape plan. This has been modified. It's very hard to see, but the units are marked on the plan, and the applicant has made, well, some of these were original to the plan, so there's a lot of evergreens in this area. And then they made changes to the shrubs plan to make sure there's evergreens blocking, or not blocking, but helping screening the units along the area. So that is a site plan presentation. It's for your information purposes only, but if you have any comments or concerns, please do tell me. And the applicant and the applicant's representatives are both here in case you want to talk to them directly.
Are there any questions or comments? So the basic idea is the landscaping is going to cover the
Screen the
screen.
units, and they are evergreen, so it'll be a year-round screening rather than a shrub that might poke through them or be viewable through during the wintertime.
Okay. Thank you. I don't think, Mr. Soslowski, it looks like you were formulating something.
Oh, no. I always think like that.
Why was the retaining wall a good idea and now it's not necessary?
I think I would like to ask the applicant to fill in things, but I think it has to do with costs, and it was an option. It was
It's not code, it's
No.
not a
no.
facade rule or anything like that, I guess, that.
No, I believe it was an option
The
that was-
foundation needs to be covered, or,
No.
No.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to item 2, a public hearing for a conditional use grant to allow temporary storage container in the single-family residential SF1 zone district, Mountain View School Subdivision, first filing Lot 2, Clearview Library, and Kling, Clearview Library District Library Director applicant. This is a quasi-judicial action. Mr. Keene will give us presentation, but first I would seek a motion to open public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into public hearing.
Second?
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett and a second from Mr. Rennemeyer to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now opened. Mr. King.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. This conditional use grant is to allow one temporary storage container in the single-family zone district located at Mountain View School Subdivision, first filing Lot 2, otherwise known as the Clearview Library. This conditional use grant is being viewed in accordance with Section 16.710 of the Municipal Code. The site location is east of Mountain View Elementary on 3rd Street and is in the single-family zone district, as I had mentioned earlier. Clearview Library is requesting a conditional use grant to allow the use of storage containers similar to the image shown below in the single-family residential zone district, which it is located. The storage will be used for crafts and event supplies that are currently being stored at employees' homes. The storage container is 20 feet by 8 and will take up 2 parking spaces on the west side, leaving 46 off-street spaces available. You can see on the site plan, the circle is where the storage container will be located. This location was also a better location for anywhere else in the parking lot because there is drainage on the south side of the parking lot, so that's why it's located further north in that central area. Since, in staff's opinion, all of the factors under Article 7 and Section 16.750 are met with the CUG. Since library parking is not enumerated in the code, Planning Commission determined at the June 20th regular meeting that 46 off-street parking spaces met the parking requirement for the library. Previously, in 2008, when it was done, it was 48 off-street, but that's why they made a new determination of 46. As far as notifications go, there was only one surrounding property owner within 100 feet, and that was the Mountain View Elementary, and they were notified by mail. And then a development sign was posted on the property and a hearing notice published in the paper on June 8th for this and Planning Commission's public hearing. On June 20th, 2018, the Planning Commission forwarded to the town board a recommendation of approval of the conditional use grant with a condition that it only be permitted for 3 years, which upon the arrival of the applicant will be required to renew via the conditional use grant process to retain the storage container on the premises for an additional allotment of time. Staff requests that the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memorandum, and supporting documents, all testimony received during the public hearing, and the recommendation. Any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Baker?
Is there any plans for screening for the plant material or?
So, I mean, where it's located, I can back up. There's not. There is, however, so on the, it's right next to an island already, so there's screening on that side, and then the other side, there will be parking that will cars will be parked there, screening it from the rest of the street.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Dr. Johnson?
Yes, is this, these materials you'll be storing, or that'll be stored in there, or this is something they have to get in and out fairly frequently?
Ann Kling, Library Director, Clearview Library District. Probably Mr. Jones on a daily...
Can you just step closer to the microphone?
On a daily basis, probably more than once a day, there'll be somebody going in and out of the storage facility container.
So that's why it's not practical to have that on some other site.
No, we actually looked at cost comparisons for off-site storage, and with the number of people using it and the frequency that they would use it, it didn't make sense to have off-site storage. And it was more expensive, actually, than the storage container.
If the new library comes to be, there'll be plenty of room for all
Absolutely.
of those materials, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not a very pretty addition to the
It really, truly
property.
is. You know, we were pretty much between a rock and a hard place. It's not really great to have people driving around with stuff in the trunks of their cars or storing it in their home garages, because that limits access to other people who might need the materials. And so we were looking at other options, and this seemed to be like the only possibility and affordable.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Just because I'm somewhat familiar, but the drawing that we're looking at here has those diagonal parking spots that are, I think, to the west of the library. Are those part of?
Those are not our spots. Those belong to the school district.
Okay, that's
We
what I
get to
thought.
use them now during the summertime, but not during the school year.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Any other questions? Okay. This is the public hearing portion, so if there is anybody who wishes to come forward during the public hearing, now would be the time. Okay, seeing none, is there anything further from the applicant? Okay, then I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move to close public hearing.
Second?
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer and a second for Mr. Bennett to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 3, a conditional use grant to allow temporary storage container in the single-family residential SF1 zone district, Mountain View School Subdivision, first filing, Lot 2, Clearview Library. Ann Kling, Clearview Library District Library Director, the applicant. Quasi judicial action. Anything further, Mr. King, for the record?
No.
Okay. Anything further from any board members? Seeing none. Mr. McCarter, is there anything further we need except for a motion?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the conditional use grant.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker approving the conditional use grant to allow temporary storage container in the single-family residential SF1 zone district for the Clearview Library District. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the conditional use grant has passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, resolution number 2018-66, a resolution appropriating additional sums of money to defray expenses in excess of amounts budgeted for the town of Windsor, Colorado for 2017, an addendum to resolution number 2018-29, legislative action. Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The next 3 items on the agenda are all related. They all have to do with us wrapping up our fiscal year 2017. If you recall, during the course of 2017, we did 2 separate refinancings. We did one in July for the Kern Reservoir loans, and then in December we finished up a refinancing of the 2015 sales and use tax bonds that we used to expand the rec center. We came into 2018, and in March we did a supplemental budget addressing 2017. The original one did not include any money concerning those 2 transactions that I described. So later in the month, we were working on the audit for 2017, and it was brought to our attention that we really should do this resolution in front of you tonight to account for that refinancing, and in order to stay in compliance with state budget laws. So it's important that we do this one first, and then the next 2 items have to do with the audit itself, and I'll be turning it over to Mr. Watkins to do that presentation. But short of any questions, I would recommend we approve Resolution 2018-66.
Are there any questions for Mr. Moyer? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll move approval of resolution number 2018-66.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Sislowski and a second from Dr. Jones approving resolution number 2018-66. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, 2017 audit presentation from Randy Watkins, CPA, Anton Collins Mitchell, LLP. With staff presentation, Mr. Moyer.
Yes, as I mentioned, Mr. Watkins is here tonight to go through the field work and give you the results of the audit that we did here in March. So with that, I will turn it over to Randy.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the town board. There should have been 2 documents that were distributed to you ahead of time, the audit wrap document and then the actual draft set of financial statements. I'll start by going through the audit wrap document, and then we'll go into the financial statements and really just kind of cover some highlights from those. As Dean mentioned, I'm Randy Watkins. I'm a partner with Anton Collins Mitchell. We were the firm engaged to perform the audit this year. I'd like to start by thanking Dean and his staff for their efforts in the work that they did in preparing for the audit. You've probably heard us tell you this before, but there's a lot of work that goes into actually preparing for us to come out, and then while we're here, we're bombarding them with questions and requests for additional information. So I do appreciate everybody's effort on that. Getting into the wrap document, we'll skip past the introductory letter and the discussion outline and start with the page that says status of our audit at the top. It's page 2. The purpose of this document is really just to communicate to you kind of the results of the audit and what we found at a high level, and anything that we're required to communicate to you as those charged with governance. It says here that we've substantially completed our audit. We're done. We're not auditing anymore, but the last step in this process is your approval of the financial statements, and then we'll get a management rep letter from management putting into writing those oral representations made throughout the audit. The audit was performed in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States. The objective of our audit is to obtain reasonable, not absolute assurance. All that means is we take samples from populations, we test the sample, we draw conclusions from that test work, and that's how we conclude that the audit or the financial statements are properly presented. Earlier on, you would have received a similar communication called an audit planning communication. The result of our audit work didn't substantially change the scope of the audit or our planned audit approach, so we basically executed on that original plan. We do expect to issue an unmodified opinion. A lot of times that's referred to as a clean opinion. That's what you're looking for, so we were able to satisfy ourselves that the financial statements are accurate. The long paragraph on this page just describes our responsibility with respect to other information contained in the CAFR. There's an introductory section, the management's discussion and analysis, budgetary comparisons, and then the stats section in the back. We're required to do certain procedures on all of that information and basically make sure that it's not materially inconsistent with anything in the financial statements. Those last two bullets just tell you that we did receive full cooperation. I already mentioned that we got all the help we needed as we were concluding the audit. The next page, results of our audit, page 3. This year there aren't any new accounting pronouncements. You'll remember a couple years ago we had to go through the pension reporting stuff. That's kind of a couple years behind us. We've got some more stuff coming up down the road you'll see that when we get to the back section of this presentation, but really nothing had changed all that much in the current year. The two transactions that Dean mentioned, the refundings, were probably the most significant things that we dealt with from an accounting and financial reporting standpoint, but everything else was pretty consistent. There weren't any changes in significant estimates or assumptions used in those estimates during the year. The boxes down below, primary areas of focus and considerations. We do a risk-based audit approach where we're devoting the majority of our attention on the higher risk areas, and risk is generally dictated by if it's governed by complicated accounting rules, or if it has significant numbers or volumes of transactions, or if the internal control environment isn't very sound. That's going to drive additional risk. The areas that we primarily focused on are revenue recognition. There's several sources of revenue in the town, and we're just making sure that those are all being properly accounted for. Accounts receivable and allowances, primarily in the enterprise funds. Capital assets and depreciation, obviously large dollar items, so we're just making sure that those are all properly accounted for. Capital lease obligations and debt, just making sure that you're in compliance with the requirements of those specific debt instruments, and that those are also being accounted for. Pension reporting continues to be a challenge, so we obviously spend more time in that area. Evaluation of going concern, we're required to spend time on that. It's typically not an issue with the municipal organization, but we do look at that, and then also evaluation of estimates that are inherent in the financial statements. Attached to this document at the back, you'll see that there were some adjusting journal entries and some past adjusting journal entries. The adjusting journal entries were actually posted and reflected in the financial statements. The past entries are considered insignificant and were not posted. And then as part of the audit, we do obviously conclude on the quality of the financial reporting, and we complete what's called a disclosure checklist to make sure that everything that's required to be disclosed is in the CAFR. Next page, internal control or financial reporting. As part of the audit, we are required to obtain an understanding of the internal control environment, but it's really for the purpose of designing the audit. We don't issue an opinion on internal controls, but if we identify any opportunities for improvement, we would bring those to your attention. They will be classified in one of these 3 categories. The most significant being a material weakness. We did not identify any material weaknesses. A control deficiency in internal control is the lowest level. That's not required to be communicated, but anything in between is considered a significant deficiency, and that is required to be communicated to you guys. We did have one significant deficiency, and really it's just a matter of documentation. There's a closing checklist that's used by the accounting department to make sure that all the procedures that are necessary at the end of every period are followed, and we're comfortable and confident that that's being completed, but there's no evidence of the review and approval process in addition to the journal entries. So just probably a minor tweak in the process that would make that go away. Other required communications, I already mentioned there were no changes in our planned audit approach. As part of the audit, we do make inquiries of board members. Nothing came out of those inquiries that we believe warrants your attention. There were no specialized skills required in the conduct of the audit. We're not aware of any consultations with other auditors, sometimes referred to as opinion shopping. We do look at other relationships throughout the town and any related parties. Nothing came out of those that we think warrants your attention. We didn't have any disagreements with management. We didn't encounter any significant difficulties. There was nothing else that came out of the audit that we think needs to be addressed by the board. And then, as I mentioned, we'll get a representation letter at the end of, or after this. The last page of the formal presentation, independence communication. We are required to be independent in both fact and appearance, and this is just an affirmative statement to that effect, which was also in the engagement letter that was executed with us as well. The next several pages are just GASB standards that will be becoming effective over the next several years. Some of them became effective this year, didn't have a dramatic effect on the town, but there are others like the OPEB and the new OPEB standard will potentially create some issues, again, similar to what we dealt with the pension standards, and there's a few others, but that's basically the formal presentation. So do you have any questions on that before I move into the financial statements?
Are there any questions
I
at this
guess-
point, Mr. Sisels?
I guess I have just the one, because you put it in a big red box on your report. And so that significant deficiency you identified, I would agree with you, it feels like it's been adequately addressed. But is that something new this year, or is it something would have historically been an issue?
It's not something we've reported in the past, so it was something that we did identify in the current year as we were going through the control environment.
So was this process being followed in prior years, or just not?
It may not have been focused on in prior years. We didn't necessarily identify it. We typically take a top-down approach, and as soon as we feel comfortable that whatever controls exist kind of at the upper levels, we're not going to get all the way down to the transactional controls unless it's necessary. So it may have just been a step that we got further down and realized that this year that wasn't being followed. And it's not, like I said, it's not that we don't believe that the checklist is being completed. There's just no evidence of review and approval. So a phrase we like to use is if you think it, ink it. So just making sure that there's an actual evidence of that review and review approval process.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Then I guess you are cleared to move on to part 2.
Okay. And here I typically only highlight changes and things like that, or more higher risk areas. So I'm not sure how you have it on your digital formats, but if it's in a PDF, so if you go with me to page 16 of the PDF, it's our audit opinion. It immediately follows the introductory section, so it's the first part of the financial section. So if you're there with me now, this is our audit opinion. Really, the top paragraph just describes what we're auditing. There's management's responsibilities, that shorter paragraph. Our responsibility is the longer section, and then the actual opinion appears at the bottom of that first page of our audit opinion. Just wanted to highlight that, as I mentioned, we are comfortable that the financial statements are materially accurate and in accordance with GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles. There's a couple long paragraphs on the next page. The top one refers to the management's discussion and analysis and other required supplementary information and describes our responsibility with respect to that. The next section below that is the other information that's contained within the CAFR. So nothing really to report on this. I just wanted you guys to know where that opinion is at in the document. And then on page 35 of the PDF, this will be the first page of the actual financial statements. Between our opinion and these are the MD&A. I'm not going to go over them tonight, but I would encourage you to take a look at it. It just puts into kind of, there's some graphs and things like that they add color to what happened during the year within the financial statements. But the first page that I'll go over is the statement of net position. This is really the balance sheet of the entire town. It's on a full accrual basis and economic resources measurement focus. So it has all current and long-term assets and liabilities. That only becomes relevant when we get to the fund financial statements. But here you can see there's governmental activities, which are the activities of the organization or the town that are primarily funded through property taxes and sales taxes and things like that. And then you've got business type activities, which are your enterprise funds. The next couple pages, they're pages 20 and 21 of the document, but 36 and 37 of the PDF. This is the statement of activities or the income statement for the town as a whole. Again, same method of accounting and financial reporting focus. And here you can see that the net position for the business or the governmental activities improved by about 10.8 million and about 13.6 million for the business type activities. I guess one thing I'd like to highlight from the statement of net position, your unrestricted net position is approximately a year's worth of annual expenditures, which is a good thing. That shows a very healthy financial condition for the town. Following those, the government-wide financial statements are the fund financial statements, so the governmental funds. The balance sheet, this is on the modified accrual basis and current financial resources measurement focus, so you won't see any long-term assets and liabilities on here. It's just primarily the cash in, cash out type items. Here again, you've got an unassigned fund balance of about 8.5 months of annual expenditures, which again is a very healthy balance sheet. There's a page that follows the balance sheet that shows you the reconciliation. So if you follow this all the way through, this will reconcile from the governmental fund financial statements to the government-wide financial statements, and show you those adjustments that are necessary. The next page is the statement of revenues.
Again, I'm sorry, can you
What page
reference
are
the
you-
page number
Oh,
you're
yeah.
on, just because?
It's page number 23 or 39 of the
23
PDF.
or 39?
39.
Yeah. Do you want me to use PDF
No.
page numbers?
Well, now I'm using the 39 numbers.
I'm on the 39. I'm on-
I'll use both.
If I
I'll
may,
continue to use both.
Our PDF stack contains a lot of other stuff, so we're
Okay.
on page 136 of that.
Okay, perfect.
So use the hard number.
Then it's 23 is the
numbers.
reconciliation.
It's just both numbers.
Of the whole packet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
I'll use both,
Okay.
and I'll refer to document numbers or PDF numbers. So then, PDF 40 or document 24 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Again, this is the income statement for the governmental funds, modified accrual, current financial resources measurement focus. 41 and 25 shows that reconciliation that'll get you back to the statement of activities for the governmental or the government-wide financial statements. The next several pages are the proprietary funds or your enterprise funds, the utility funds. These are on the same basis as the government-wide, so there are no reconciling items. This would be page 42 and 26. The first page is the statement of net position. There really won't be any difference between this and what's reported in the government-wide financial statements. The statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position is on page 43 or 27, again, by each of those individual enterprise funds. Then there's a cash flow statement. So this cash flow will show you the sources and uses of cash within those enterprise funds, which is on page 44 of the PDF or 28 of the document. That concludes the financial statements. So then now we're into the footnotes, and there's only a couple footnotes that I really wanted to highlight. That first footnote just describes your accounting policies and procedures, which, as I mentioned earlier, didn't change this year, so they're consistent with prior years. If you go to PDF page 58, I'll give you the document number here in a second, 42. This shows you the capital asset roll forward. So this shows you the beginning balance that'll agree to last year's CAFR, the activity from the current year, which would be capital asset additions, and then the depreciation expense on those. And then the ending balance will flow forward to the government-wide financial statements. And that first page is the governmental activities. So then the next page, which would be 59 or 43, shows you the business type activities, the enterprise funds. And then the only other footnote I was going to touch on was it starts on page 60 of the PDF or 44 of the document. And here's where all of the long-term debt is described. On this page, about halfway down, you'll see where it says on December 7th, 2017. That's the first refunding of that sales and use tax revenue bonds that Dean mentioned. There's just some accounting complications around that and how that gets reflected in the financial statements. You end up with the deferred loss on refunding or a deferred gain on refunding associated with that. But that was one new transaction during the year. At the bottom of that page, you'll see the roll forward for the governmental activities showing the beginning balance that would agree to last year's CAFR in any activity during the year. And then the top of the next page, which is 61 of the PDF or 45 of the document, shows you future maturities, which a lot of people find that interesting at least, where it shows you the actual cash or your maturities over the next 5 years and then in 5-year increments after that. And then it's followed by the business type activities, same type of deal with the roll forward and then the maturities. That's really it. For you guys, there's not the pension accounting. It's complicated, but there's not big numbers. Your plan is in pretty good shape from a funding standpoint. So there's not a lot. It's not like you've got the same issues that the school districts have with their para. But it does continue to be a challenge from an accounting and financial reporting standpoint. It's just not big numbers. So, any questions? I tend to go through this pretty quickly, so I know how exciting accounting can be, but didn't know if you guys had any questions that may have come up as you look through the documents.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Watkins at this point?
Well, I'm trying to find it. I can't find it. There was one note we was commenting, and it was looking at a line entry that was equipment, small equipment, I think was the line item entry, but the description said that it included, I think, costs of resurfacing. And that seemed like an odd mix for that particular.
It was in the financial statements?
I believe so.
Okay. Typically, you wouldn't see that much detail. It may have been in the MD&A, That's probably where you
Yeah.
found that, or the
Yes,
actual
I-
description of the
I suspect it
resurfacing.
was.
And that's a policy election. We have towns go either way with that, but typically a resurfacing is, it's kind of hard to decide, you know, if it's truly improve or significantly extending the life of a capital asset, or if it's just kind of maintaining a capital asset. And so typically that's considered maintenance on an asset on the roads versus repaving or
I see.
expanding
So
or
it's-
anything like that. But again, it's a policy election. We've had municipalities go either way with that, so.
Okay. I get it. You have to put it somewhere.
Right.
So based on this, I know the community rec center, that sales and use tax revenue fee, we have been above our collection model. And I know there's, we had to wait, was it 5 or 10 years? Because the previous board had directed and had wanted to do an early payoff or to take some of those excess funds and start, applying them. But there was a certain period of time. And are we getting close to that, or when would we be able to start?
I'm gonna say that I think on that new refinancing we did in 2017, we set aside an escrow account to pay off the original bonds, and the rest of it we took through an installment loan through Chase Bank. I'm gonna say that I think in 2021 we can start paying that without penalty.
Okay.
So,
So that's still the track we're on, and I think
Yes.
that will probably, if we continue to collect as we have, we will have an early payoff
Yes.
than what we had anticipated when we originally took that note, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, keeping track of that. So.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, thank you for the presentation. And Mr. Moyer, again, I see Vicki and both Cheryl are out here this evening. Thank you for all your hard work that you go through to put all of this information. I know it takes you lots and lots of hours and time and probably some brain damage to get all this to us and to him. But thank you. You guys do a really good job, and we are always complimented on our budgets every year. So thank you.
Mayor, could they put
Yes.
more pictures in next year?
More pictures for David. Okay, so with that, moving on to item 6, resolution number 2018-67, a resolution accepting the audit report for 2017 prepared by Anton Collins Mitchell LLP, the certified public accountants. Mr. Moyer, did you have anything further you wanted to add?
No, it's just pretty much what it says there, formally adopting the report.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 2018-67.
Second?
A motion on the floor for Mr. Rannemeyer and a second for Mr. Bennett, approving resolution 2018-67. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 7, ordinance number 2018-1561. An ordinance amending sections 4-3-350 and 4-3-490 of the Windsor Municipal Code to align its terms with tax measures approved by the voters with respect to expansion of the Windsor Community Recreation Center. Speaking of, this is second reading. It will require a supermajority vote and legislative action. Ms. Eno.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. As you indicated, this is the second reading of the ordinance, basically being a housekeeping measure because we caught a couple of things that did not get corrected when the initial measure passed for increasing the taxes up to 3.95%. So this, I hope, catches the remaining ones that we found in the code, and it would align everything so that everything is consistent. So the staff requests that this be approved. Supermajority vote is required. There have been no changes since the last reading.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Emo? Okay. Seeing none, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1561.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Rennermeyer approving Ordinance number 2018-1561. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, ordinance number 2018-1562. An ordinance repealing, amending, and readopting section 4-3-30 of the Windsor Municipal Code to make certain definitions consistent with statewide standards recommended by the Colorado Municipal League. This is first reading and legislative action. Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before you this evening is the ordinance that would codify a portion of the Municipal League's uniform statewide sales tax definitions for home rule communities. We had a work session on this, and Dean and I explained to you why we've been asked by CML to adopt these definitions. What Dean and I told you was that we wanted to adopt those definitions only to the extent they already appear in our code or in the exemptions that we have incorporated into the code. So this is the first pass at adopting the CML uniform definitions. The next step will follow a more global review of the sales and use tax code, which Mr. Moyer has indicated he wants to undertake in 2019. There is one definition that I want to draw your attention to that may come out before we take up first reading, or strike that before we take up second reading, and that's the definition for food for home consumption. That definition, after talking it over with Shane and with Dean, we believe probably doesn't belong in our code, because that definition is more suitable to municipalities that exempt food for home consumption from sales tax. In Windsor, we tax food, all food, and don't distinguish food for home consumption, and we don't distinguish the exemption that appears in that definition. So I want to ask you to approve this on first reading with the understanding that after further discussion with Dean and Shane, we may bring it back on second reading with that definition taken out. This is a phrase that does not appear in our existing code, so really should be taken out, because otherwise it will be an orphan. I call them orphan definitions. But for our purposes this evening, the remainder of the definitions have been held up against our code and the exemptions that were under state law adopted by our code in 2004. And I am recommending approval on first reading with a simple majority vote. If Dean or Shane have anything to add to this, I'm happy to step aside.
Okay. Either of you have anything further?
You did a great job, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. McCarter? So this is an example of how we're using our home rule to make this exception as to how we want so we don't want to add that to our list?
Because we're somewhat unique in taxing food, this definition really fits a community that exempts food.
Already.
So that's the only one of these definitions, and thank you to Mr. Sislowski for also raising that and asking why is this in the package. I think he's right, and Dean and Shane agree. So among the four of us, we may get this figured out, but for tonight, I'm asking that you approve it as presented.
Okay. Any additional questions from Mr. McCarter? Mr. Sislowski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have to comment back because I sent our council a rather detailed kind of commentary on this, and I apologize for taking probably more of your time than it warranted, but it does sound like something good came out of it, so I will continue to read.
I do appreciate another set of eyes, and Mr. Sislowski pointed out a number of items. I think we sorted those out adequately, but this one, it does require a little more attention.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I'd move for approval of ordinance number 2018-1562.
Second?
Motion on the floor from Dr. Jones and a second from Mr. Renemeyer approving ordinance 2018-1562. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 9, ordinance number 2018-1563. an ordinance repealing Article 1 of Chapter 18 of the Windsor Municipal Code, making certain findings of fact, and adopting a park open space and trail development fee as Article 18 of Chapter 17 of the Windsor Municipal Code. First reading and legislative action. Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Before you tonight is a first reading of an ordinance that basically asks you to repeal our current ordinance in regards to park development fees and create a new park trails and open space development fee. We've met on this twice, March 26th in a work session and May 21st. Before I get into the recommendation tonight, I just want to briefly, you've seen most of these slides in the past, but I want to briefly kind of explain how we've gotten to where we are tonight. So as you know, back in 2003, we did a master plan, and in that master plan, it was identified that Windsor was growing, and we needed to make sure that we had the money to pay for future parks, and as we grew and built out. In 2003, and then completed in 2004, was a park impact study. In that study, fees came out, which basically say, and that is the current fee structure that we operate under today, that we have neighborhood park fees, community park fees, and a fee in lieu. So those are the current fees as you see them today for 2018. Then in 2016, we did a master plan. You probably recall adopting this. Several objectives came out of that we continue to work towards today. One of them was developing and determining how we prioritize our growth and funding. And then, so about this time last year, you adopted this map, which basically identifies all of the future build out for our park system, not trails and open space, just parks and how they're developed. So on your screen, you can see everything in green is a park that we are already, for lack of a better term, on the hook in that we have a development agreement to build out at some point. There's a park to the north up in Harmony Ridge, a park identified to the west in Fossil Creek, and then there was a park down here on the southern end, down along Crossroads, which we just recently purchased about 2 months ago, the LeBouf Farm property. So that basically is our park system at build out. So what we were talking about after that is how do we fund it? How do we pay for building out those parks moving forward? Also in that master plan talks about evaluating your park fees, and that's basically how we got here tonight in the discussions we've had since this plan came out. You've seen this chart before, but it basically, when you look at it, you see that in the neighborhood park fee, we have enough money, we believe, to build out the parks that we currently have on our docket for neighborhood parks. So we feel very confident that the funds there are in a good amount sitting in the fund balance. On the community park side, though, however, at build out, we are probably around $30 million or more short. And again, this doesn't take into account what the future cost of building parks are. As you know, construction continues to go up. So this really was what led me to bring to you in the discussions we've had subsequently in regards to we didn't need to collect the neighborhood park fee anymore and just continue to put it in neighborhood parks because we know what the build out looks like and we feel like our fund balance is good there, that we're better off combining the two fees and then be able to use them for a park, neighborhood, community, and then ultimately trails and open space. It really doesn't matter. Just define it as one fee in one park. So an example that I show you tonight, and you've seen this one before, if we had a 1,000-unit development at today's fees, the developer or the builders over time per permit would pay about $5.2 million with one single fee. If you looked at it based upon our current fee structure, they would be paying the same amount of money in two different fees. So there is a net zero impact to developers as we sit today. Basically what this ordinance change allows us to do is put the money in one pot and use it as we see fit to build out our park system. So before you tonight is an improvement. I'm asking you to approve the ordinance. Basically it repeals Article 1 of Chapter 18, which is our old fee structure, creates Article 18 in Chapter 17, and I'll mention later we moved it, as you can see. It's a new fee structure, basically creating one single park development fee structure. So if it's adopted, the new fee in 2018 would be that. Again, reminder, net impact to developers is 0. Staff will maintain basically 2 accounting systems under the old fee structure until that money is spent out, and then the new one as we move forward. A couple of reminders, as I just mentioned, we did move it from Chapter 18 to 17. This is basically a little bit of a cleanup on staff's end. Felt like it fit better in the subdivision as opposed to building regulations. That's also where your road impact and school fees are at. Rate of interest on refunds, you can see what section that is basically if we had to get into the refunds, as we talked before in a work session, I don't feel like we ever would, but if we had to, the interest they would get is 2% plus what the town had made over while we were holding that money, and then there's a 2% fee, so it's basically a wash, meaning the developer would get back the money that we gained while we were holding it if we had to go into the refund. And then Mr. Sislowski at the last work session questioned whether we should be using, we were using the Denver Boulder CPI as an inflation index, and so he mentioned that we should look at Colorado construction tax index, and we did that. Staff felt that that was a great recommendation, so appreciate that very much. And so you'll see that reflected in the ordinance as well. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Again, this is first reading, and assuming it's approved, we'll bring it back to you next month.
Any questions from Mr. Lucas? Mr. Baker?
One question, 2 questions. We currently have a trails master plan, correct?
We do.
Is there an open space kind of master plan?
There is not one. That is something that we talked about at the retreat. I am currently working with some consultants to try to create a scope, ask them what's that going to cost to do that, and then bring that back to you hopefully in the very near future, potentially even this year, as we talked about in our strategic retreat, to look at the trails, the open space piece of, and also strategic plan in regards to, if you recall our discussion around, we haven't surveyed our public on needs since 2011. So we're trying to package that all into one thing and bring it forward to use very soon.
And then you mentioned using this new fee for trails. Is that after we've built the parks as you see fit, or is it kind of happen concurrently as?
It could potentially happen concurrently with one caveat. We need to make sure that we define the cost of the trail system. And so that's part of this study. So we know what our trail system looks like, but we know we have to build, for example, another 20 miles of trail. But what we haven't defined is what is that going to cost. And so part of that plan that I'd like to bring to you shortly will define the cost. And then once we know that, then at that point we can say, yes, we can use it for trails or for open space. But we need that piece yet before I would say, sure, let's put development of X trail or purchase of X open space over development of a park.
It seems like it could happen concurrently. As a new park gets developed, we may need trails to get to that park.
Absolutely. But again, that study needs to come first so that we've quantified what the cost of trails and open space are.
Let me speak to that just briefly. This is a statutory requirement that in order to impose impact fees on new development for new capital facilities, the statute requires that the costs be quantified, is the expression in the statute. And so until we quantify trails costs, Eric is saying we'll still collect the dollars, but we won't expend them until the quantification has been reviewed by you and approved by you, so that we can then use that as the basis to take this stream of revenue and use it to build trails in addition to parks and open space facilities. So it's just a legal requirement we want to make sure we address to make sure we're in compliance with the statute.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Sislowski?
Yes, Mr. Lucas, thank you for changing the index. I think it makes more sense for what we're trying to do. Mr. McCarter, I don't envy you, because whenever you change an article in a section, someone gets to go through the rest of the code to make sure all your cross-references are.
I anticipated this, Mr. Sislowski, and you're going to love this. Section 1 of this ordinance says that we're repealing Article 1 of Title or of Chapter 18, but then it says that it will be codified as reserved. so that we don't have to renumber the rest of Chapter 18. So it's just going to sit there with parentheses around it, probably indefinitely, but we didn't want to shift everything up because then we would have to change all sorts of cross-references.
Well, the cross-references now to this particular fee would have to be to Article, what is it, 18? As
Yeah,
opposed
Chapter 17,
Yeah.
Article 18 instead of
That's it.
Chapter 18.
I just don't
Article
envy
1.
the task of having to make sure your cross-references are accurate.
I think we'll be okay, but this may be one of those things that Kim brings back for a cleanup. Or several.
Okay, Mr. Ennemeyer.
I'd like to ask staff to explain a little bit more this Colorado Construction Cost Index by CDOT. We're changing an index. This could affect developers, fees that are brought in, everything else. So I'm kind of curious what that's going to
So
mean.
it's put out, and Scott, you can be used a little more frequently, so if you want to jump in. My understanding is it's put out quarterly by CDOT.
Okay.
It basically looks at the cost of construction in the state and how that goes up and down. I did go back and look over the past 5 years. It historically has performed a little better than the CPI. And that was one of my concerns when the question was raised, was which one is more advantageous for us. And I think, as Mr. Soslowski pointed out in the last work session, we're talking about constructing parks, so why not tie the construction costs, which that's what the money is for, to construction in the index as opposed to a consumer price index. So that's the research I did and my understanding of it. I feel like we will gain a little bit more over the years, assuming that construction continues as it.
And I'm not saying I'm not in favor of it. I just want to have the talking point down so that if this comes up in subsequent years, that we know how to explain what we did. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, I'm going to support the ordinance because I think it offers us good flexibility as we continue to move forward. And you can do it what you deem best is needed at the time. So, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 2018-1563.
Second?
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer, second for Mr. Bennett, approving ordinance 2018-1563. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And it passes unanimously. Moving on to item 10, an economic development report. Ms. Johnson.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Town Board members. Seems like I was just here. I don't know why. I've been up here a lot, but I'm going to try to tell you what we've been doing in economic development. So, and the next time I'm up, we'll do more of a prospect report. I'm switching to like every 6 months because, as you guys know, when I was coming in quarterly and telling you about it, you weren't seeing much of the dial move from a standpoint of prospect activity. So we'll bring that in next time I come up and give you some more updates on year-to-date totals and tallying of where the jobs and products that we've done from an economic development standpoint are standing. So since April, when I was here the last time, we have had, went to a one-day, Jill and I both attended an Economic Development Council of Colorado one-day conference in Westminster on April 24th. They had some interesting conversations, did talk about broadband as well, and some other relative economic development conversations went on. It was just a quick one-day event. We also attended, Dean and I went to the NCEA event, which they announced that they were changing their name to One No Co. So NCEA, or Northern Colorado Economic Alliance, is actually the entity that kind of services Larimer County, but they do promote marketing both Larimer and Weld County or all of Northern Colorado. So they have now changed their name to One No Co. And that is not currently an organization that we finance or invest in at this time. The Northern Colorado Regional Tourism Authority, we had a meeting with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade on May 7th to talk about progress, about where we were with the RTA. And basically what came out of that was that we need to get moving on another resolution and move forward with some of their requests for the $86.1 million that we had received 2.5 years ago. And then Northern Colorado Economic Alliance, or One No Co, did a kickoff FAM tour, what we call FAM tour for economic development. That's familiarization tour. So this fall, they're going to be bringing in about 5 site selectors that will tour all of northern Colorado. I will be part of that event again this year, which means I get to go and showcase and talk a little bit about Windsor and the opportunities here. So those site selectors that have relative industries that would be interested in Windsor will get to learn about the opportunities here. They haven't finalized the date for that, but it will be sometime this fall. Then we went, when you were at CML last week, we went down to the northern Colorado and represented the Northern Colorado Regional Tourism Authority at the State Economic Development Commission, who was the commission that approved the RTA funds or the final projects for those funds. We went and did a presentation to them, and again, the board stressed that we need to work on the final resolutions, and we need to get moving on some of the things that need to be doing. Really, we still have 2.5 years to basically put a stake in the ground to get any of those projects moving. We will, I believe Jep Seaman, who's our representative for legal counsel, will be writing up the notes from that and sending it out to the NCRTA board, so they'll have a full update, and then we'll get their advice on how they want the staff to proceed forward with the next meeting sometime this summer. They'd like us to come back and give an update on the projects more specifically. Then I was asked to be part of the Ranch Master Plan Steering Committee, so I attended my first meeting on that same day, June 21st. So they have hired a firm right now to go and vet out all the master plan ideas that they had for, new stadiums and new projects and realignment of roads and blowing up tops off of buildings and going big. And so they're kind of reevaluating that. So part of what I did was not only give them our opinions about realignment or what we could do or what we saw, but also talked about how we envision Windsor's, that corridor as Fairgrounds Avenue is really our entertainment corridor, and then the other things that were going on in Windsor that were relative to or they could tie into the ranch and their events and their planning. In the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've also had 4 companies that have come in and looked or met with me and talked about locating in Windsor. So specific prospect visits doesn't mean they send out a solicitation for me to send properties back. It means they actually came and visited and specifically either toured or sat down in my office and talked about real opportunities. Speaking engagements in the last couple months, I spoke at Leadership Northern Colorado on May 22nd and specifically talked about Economic Development 101 and economic development activity and what was going on in Windsor. That class is graduating, or already did graduate this month, I think. And that again is the Leadership Northern Colorado's Olive Laramie Weld. So they had attendees come from all over and learn about economic development that day. And that was actually in Windsor at Pelican Lakes. General activity, I had the conference there again, business listening session we did on May 9th. Jill attended a ribbon cutting at North Range Behavioral Center, another ribbon cutting, 12 at 12s. Bunch of stuff going on from that aspect in conjunction with the chamber. The next business listening session will be July 25th. So again, if you have not responded and would like to attend, I know she's heard from a few of you. Let Jill know. And then Jill is currently also working on 8 expansion projects, and she's had 10 BR&E or business retention and expansion visits in the last 4 to 6 weeks.
And Stacy, I think I've seen 2 board members respond to say that they're going to go to the business listening, which is our cap, right? So I think we've got 2 of you that plan on attending.
Right. To be honest, we were kind of going to hope for some other opportunities to some of the new town board members if they felt like they wanted to. Okay. Not that we were trying to exclude ones who have already been there, but just giving that opportunity.
So, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, you're willing to step back if somebody else?
Absolutely. I said, yeah, I've been to one, and if somebody else wants to attend, that'd be great, but I'll be there if needed.
Okay.
I've not been to one, so I am planning on attending.
So
yeah,
I'll have Jill tidy that up and get out the invitation and get that going. So.
Great.
Ms. Johnson, can
Yes.
you go back one slide there really quick? Can you explain what is involved in a business retention visit?
So that's usually a one-on-one site visit that we go actually out to the visit where there's a tour of the facility or to meet with them and talk about whatever problem is going on with them. Sometimes it's we need assistance doing this. Sometimes it's just a check-in from us that says, hey, you know, we would like to let you know that we're here and here's what our services are. So the meeting or the intent of the visit can be several. It can be tours. It can usually, if it's a tour, we try to include you guys in it so that you can have an opportunity for that. Sometimes we'll hear things on the street about companies not sure what they're doing, and then we want to make it, or I'll make a point to say, Jill, we need to go visit this company because I think that they need to expand and here's how we can help them, or maybe, you know, we've heard different things. So
Was that similar to the Snaptron meeting we had
Yes.
earlier? Was
yep,
that
that's considered a
business
BR&E
retention?
visit.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was a little bit more in depth because it was an actual tour and more people were involved. But that's the kind of sort of thing that we do. If it's usually, like I said, a tour, we try to invite you guys so you can be there as well. But usually that's part of Jill's day-to-day is just, it's a touchstone, right? We're touching and maintaining contact with our existing industry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then also, Stacey, did you want to mention the Dutch Brothers tour?
Yeah, so I think you guys should have gotten the invitation. It is posted downstairs as well because we heard from more than 3 of you that would like to attend. So Friday on the 29th this week, oh my God, at the end of June already. So the 29th, June 29th at 10 a.m., we're just going to meet at Dutch Brothers and get a quick tour and hopefully sample some of their stuff that they've got.
Really to follow on to Mr. Rennemeyer's question on that visit, are those retention visits things we initiate, or are they contacting us saying, hey, we have some question issues, can you come out and talk?
All the above. So sometimes they'll call us and say that we've got some issues with workforce, or we need help with that, or we need help because we're expanding, or we need help because of certain things, or sometimes our community partners will tell us, hey, we've told this person to reach out and contact you. If you haven't heard back from them, then we reach out to them. But usually a lot of part of what Jill is doing is actually maintaining our connectivity to our business industry and letting them know what services we provide. Because a lot of people are neck deep into doing their business and they don't know that we're here. We want to get to them and let them know that we're here to help, because if something comes up and we could have helped them that could have saved that company or jobs in that company, it's vital for us to do that. And so I always say it's always easier to keep what you've got than it is to go out and get new. So maintaining that seems to be a huge priority in this office, and I'd like to see that continue.
I can tell you in the last 6 months, I've toured probably about 10 businesses between last year and this year, the Chamber, having their Experience Windsor Day, the Snaptron. I mean, it's basically a time where the businesses can share their vision of where they are going, what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, the, you know, new products, new features, et cetera, that they have coming out. I find them very, very valuable to retaining business, that relationship.
And one other question then, just on the regional transit, is because that was originally a 3 or 4 project kind of bundle. Is it still being approached kind of as a
Yeah, so the Regional Tourism Authority is who, I know, they should have named it something different, right, to RTAs. But they, that's still the 4 projects. So the one in Windsor, Pella Grande, the 2 in Loveland, which is the indoor-outdoor water park hotel, and the whitewater rafting facility, and then the Stanley Film Center up in Estes Park.
And what is it they're asking us to do with this?
Just to come in and give them project updates about the status of where those projects exist. So where are they at? Do they all have their funding? Are they all moving forward? Have they submitted site plans or anything like that? They're asking for that. And then there's certain resolutions that we have to go through by state statute that say we're going to do this, and they set up something called MEEPs, which is like how we appropriate the funds that come in. This project gets 10%, this one gets 20, this one gets 30, and so we're still negotiating all of that.
I think part of the issue was sort of the hurdles that they had set for us.
The guardrails. Yeah, are they aware that we basically put everything on hold and have tentatively scheduled to only meet once a year because we've decided we really can't do anything until some of those guardrails maybe are perhaps changed or lifted?
They are aware of that, and that will be something that the NCRTA board will get to decide how we move forward on explaining that to them a little bit more in depth.
Okay, wonderful. Can't wait to hear. Okay, Mr. Beck.
When you're recruiting businesses or when prospects are visiting our community, what are some of the common things that you're looking for, or questions they're asking, or characteristics they're looking for?
Do we have the space, and how quickly can we get it done?
And quickness. Broadband ever come up?
Not typically, but it's always usually assumed that we have it or something
Assumed.
is out there. Yeah, so, broadband is a utility or an infrastructure that if we build it, they will come if you get the message out in the right way. So we don't have a lot of high-end users of broadband or those kind of utilities at this point, but it doesn't mean they won't come if we do have it, So that was one of the topics that I talked about years ago, just saying, certain roads to be expanded and infrastructure to be focused on, and broadband was one of them, in my opinion.
How much does roadway or transportation opportunities come up?
It depends on the specific prospect, because if moving goods and services is really vital to them, then it depends on whether it's by rail, by car or truck, those kind of things. It really depends. Mobility is highly important to most companies, both for their workforce as well as for their goods or services. So whether it's a manufacturer that's trying to ship out tons of widgets, or whether it's a highly employed office building that has to get their employees to work safely and on time, they're all vital to a company.
Businesses that have chosen not to come here, and you've talked about this in the past, a lot of times it's space, available space. Are there other major issues that are preventing some businesses or causing some businesses to choose to go elsewhere?
Right now, I would say basically state to state that it has to do with the low unemployment rate, which is nothing we can really control at this time. So most of the workforce issues are something that we have no power or control of, but that are all over the state of Colorado. So it's not something that Windsor specifically could do something about to modify it. It really has to do with the state of our economy and how well we're doing, and the fact that we just don't have that, the employees that they may need. But that's a nationwide issue right now, so.
Okay, Mr. Baker.
I had a broadband question, so thank you.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Well, thank you, Stacy, for all the work you do.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Moving on to communications from our town attorney.
Just want to thank the community for sending me to the Municipal League Conference last week. The attorney sessions were all excellent, and I have retained all the materials for future reference. So thank you, Windsor, for that opportunity.
Additional communications from town staff. Mr. Balstead? Mr. Lucas?
Didn't make it out. If you remember, we moved our farmers market from Thursdays to Saturdays. This past Saturday was our first farmers market. 3 vendors sold out, and the food truck was almost out of food. I didn't make it. I was in the mountains enjoying some woods time, but staff tells me that it was packed the entire 4 hours that it was open. So initial thoughts are that the move from Thursday to Saturdays, based upon public feedback, was the right choice.
Was there any pedestrian counts or anything to that effect, to know how many people are?
No, I'll have the financial numbers tomorrow. That's really what we track with the markets.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Holdling? Again, congratulations on your award. We're proud of you. Mr. Moyer? Ms. Johnson? Ms. Emo? Communications from our town manager.
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Communications from town board members. I want to go over, or we'll go over future meetings here since we didn't have time in our meeting upstairs. But again, I too want to thank everybody for the opportunity to attend CML up in Vail this year. I hope the new members found it a useful and a learning opportunity. I think there were some good sessions, some good counterparts to be able to have conversation with and find out what's going on in those other communities. But I hope you too found value in attending the conference this year. Moving on to future meetings. So tonight we met with Johnny Olson, followed by our broadband update, which we'll have to figure out when that can come back so we can continue that discussion at another time in another work session. July 2nd, we will have a work session with Sam Light presentation. So that is our CIRSA presentation that we will have here. July 9th, we'll have our dinner open kind of meeting. There's nothing on the agenda at this point in time, but I think by the time the agenda comes out again, there probably will be an item on the agenda from at least 6 to 7 because we do have a lot of things that we need to cover in these next couple of months. That evening, we will have not only a town board meeting, but a Kern board meeting. We do need to change our July 16th meeting date because we are meeting at noon that day, so it does say 6 p.m. here. But
Yes, Your Honor, we've got, it's changed now, it's not in your packet, and I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I met with staff today, so we've got it. The next one you see will say noon to 6 p.m. RO plant tours. So we've got it on there because I'm not sure what time we're going to return, but we're basically thinking about the time we normally start, we'll be finished.
So I hope everybody can attend that important work session and opportunity, again, for our learning experience as we're looking at some additional opportunities with water. And then July 23rd, our work session will be on Northern Water presentation from Brian Werner, who will be here, as well as a town board meeting. July 30th is a fifth Monday. And so we tentatively have planned not to meet, or are we planning to meet?
I believe that based on the correspondence that I saw earlier with the director of the library, we are going to look at a different date
Okay.
to meet on July 30th.
Yeah, so July 30th, we will be, you all have a night off as of this, at this point in time. I see some additional things on the coming up during events. So August 7th is National Night Out. October 2nd is the joint dinner with Well County. As far as future work session topics, you can take off car dealerships right now. I don't think that that's going to be coming back. If it comes back, I believe it might come back as something else. But at this point in time, I don't think that's something that we have to worry about fitting in. And if there is nothing else, then I would seek a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker to adjourn. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And we are officially adjourned. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. That's and good luck.
It's like